Alright, so there is a new PC hardware player entering the US market, and the brand is called Endorfy. And I would say some to most of you in the US at least probably may not have heard of them because they are primarily based in Europe. They did start listing their products on vendors like Amazon and Newegg, so they are trying to get their name out. They did reach out to me for a couple reviews on their products, and we ultimately decided to go with the Arx 700 case as well as the Fluctus ARGB fans, which are competing against entry budget level products like the P12s from Arctic. And these are insane value still. They're $35 for a pack of 5. Very hard to beat. But this video will only be covering the Arx 700 case, while the Fluctus fans will be a separate video. Now, I do have to be transparent that they did pay me for my production time, but not for my thoughts and opinions. So if I think the case is good, I will tell you. If I think it's trash, I will also tell you. Okay, so let's take a look. The Arx 700 has two variants, ARGB and Air. I have the ARGB version, which comes with 4 of their 140mm Stratus RGB fans, while the Air comes with 5 blacked out non-RGB fans. Pretty simple. So as a compact mid-tower case coming in at around $124 US, it is about the same size as the recently released Corsair Frame 4000D and slightly smaller than the Phanteks G400A, both of which I have covered. And so far, I believe they only have black cases currently and no other color options. I don't know if they are going to release a white version, but I think they should at some point to keep up with the market trends. However, I do think Endorfy should hold back on doing more color options because I do have some feedback about their case, and I think they should really make some adjustments to their design first before committing to mass production. Anyways, the case looks pretty ordinary, nothing outstanding. The mesh front panel though, with slim side vents, is similar to designs like the Shadowbase 800 from Be Quiet. Front I/O are at the top of the case, which include your power and reset buttons, headset and mic jacks, 2 USB-A which supports up to 5 gigabits per second, and 1 USB-C which supports up to 10 gigabits per second. Tempered glass panel, side panel, and top mesh panel are all secured via thumb screws on the back, so you just tug and slide to remove after loosening. The glass panel is also pretty clear with a very small amount of tint, as you can see, not super dark at all. The sheet metal used in this case is actually pretty solid. In fact, a quick recent comparison is that the Corsair Frame 4000D has some thin flimsy parts like on the PSU shroud and the top mesh cover. The Arx 700 feels very sturdy all around with all of its parts, which is pretty impressive. The front panel has 2 pieces that come off. The front mesh just pulls out from the top, and the frame around it also pulls out, giving you easier access to the fan rails, which are removable and adjustable, which I'll talk about later. I think they could have just made both of these 2 mesh frame pieces as one, but it's honestly not a big deal, so I'll leave it at that. Each of the dotted perforated holes on the top and front mesh panels are about 1mm in diameter. Although I would like to see at least the top mesh panel have larger perforations to yield better ventilation for exhaust, especially if you're mounting a top radiator. Having reviewed all sorts of cases, I was really making that judgment by eye and comparing some of my past experiences with cases and thermals that I've done. Now, 1mm holes are okay, but it could actually be way better. One particular case that comes to mind was the OG Corsair 4000D I tested long ago. 240 rad up top, and that removable dust filter had just about the same size perforations. Removing the dust filter dropped the temps by 4 degrees on the 4000D during stress tests, which actually is a decent amount depending on what you do. So the Arx 700 is also not up to date because it does not support back connect motherboards. As you can see, there aren't cutouts for cables. Even though conventional motherboards are still more popular, they should still include it. Now, the manual said that this case only fits up to ATX size motherboards, but I was able to fit an eATX like this Z790 Ace from MSI just fine, and it stops exactly right at the cable grommets. In fact, I would say it probably fits better than a regular size ATX board because an ATX doesn't cover up the ugly cable straps from the back. CPU cooler height limit is 179mm, which is more than plenty for basically any cooler on the market. GPU length goes up to 410mm, which would even accommodate the gigantic RTX 5080 and 5090 Astro from Asus or the Supreme cards from MSI. As for vertical mounted GPUs, there's no option for that in this case. And to access the PCIe slots, there is a magnetic cover here you just flip out. Then onto the backside. You do get about 340 millimeters for your PSU, and that is also when your one and only single 3.5-inch hard drive spot is occupied, as there is some space for your cables to just go over the top of that drive. As for 2.5-inch SSDs, you can mount up to 7 drives, 4 on the back, 2 on the front, and 1 down in the basement if you're not mounting a 3.5-inch hard drive. A note about the two mounting positions here is that I'm not liking the fact that these two SSDs are only secured via 2 screws. I feel like I could just snap these off. And there is a long fine mesh dust filter at the bottom of the case that pulls out from the front. I also want to mention that the PSU shroud is not winning any beauty contests. It is certainly designed for utility and does not look clean. On the back, they do have a hub, or rather 2 separate hubs, to connect your fans. If you look closely, it's actually 2 PCBs stacked on top of each other. The one on top is for your ARGB, and the one behind is for your fan speed. Both of these PCBs are held down by a couple of long screws. And it looks like you can also reposition those hubs vertically, as the screw hole options are visible from the front side. They are a bit finicky and loose, and I think they should have just combined the two functions into one single hub. And at the same time, all these adjustment holes along with the insane amount of loops for your cable ties show up on the front side of the tray and just look awful. There is no reason to have that many cable tie loops in this case, especially in that top right corner where the hub is. In fact, I would say half the amount would have been more than sufficient. If it were up to me, I would cut it down to a third, strategically placed, and it would make the case look so much cleaner from both the front and the back. There are also 9 cutouts here for mounting various hardware like custom loop reservoirs. This is also where I feel like the case is a bit outdated because the slots are 20 to 40 millimeters apart, and having tried several different pump res units from Bitspower, EK, AlphaCool, and Corsair, and none of my hardware fit. I would just get rid of those slots and make a clean tray on this side of the chamber, because nowadays, most people are just mounting their pump res units on their radiators, fans, or fan mounting slots anyways. I was given a couple links to older reservoir clamps that did supposedly fit, like an AlphaCool one you can still get, and an EK one that is now discontinued. Now, in my observation, most modern pump rest units don't use those mounting dimensions. They are usually going to be 65, 80, 92, 120, or 140 millimeter adapter brackets. Now, of course, you have modding and 3D printing solutions, but most people aren't going to be modders. The vast majority are going to just want to plug and play with easy to get hardware. As for fan capacity, the rear panel can do a 120 or 140, top can do up to 3 120s or 2 140s, front panel can do 3 120s or 3 140s. Front fans are secured via 2 detachable rails, which makes assembly quite convenient. If you want 120mm fans instead, you can just move the rails in closer. Additionally, you can also mount a 120 fan on top of the PSU shroud here. But you also can't and shouldn't, because in my example here, the mount is too close to the motherboard and blocks the bottom right headers like for your front I/O. But I think you'll only run into this problem with ATX and EATX boards. Smaller boards should not have this issue. Then we have radiator support. Rear can do 120 or 140 rads, but your choice of 140 must be pretty much exactly 140 millimeters wide, or else it won't fit, like the EK models, which are 145 millimeters. Top panel can do up to 280 or 360, including EK's rads that are known to run a bit longer, and the front panel can pretty much do the same as the top panel, 280 and 360. As for thicknesses, that's going to depend on whether you have multi-rad config and or how big your other rads and fans will be in the front and rear panels. Single 360 up front only could fit something like the AlphaCool UT60, and the same deal goes for the top panel as well. If you want to stack 2 360 rads on the top and front panels, I would keep it slim down to 30 millimeters or lower with standard fans, while ditching the rear single fan so you can have room to access your top radiator fittings and easier tube runs down the back. The front radiator, though, does have flexibility for top or bottom oriented ports, with the top side just barely enough room, clearing standard fans on a slim radiator like Bitspower. But when it comes to the 280 variant radiators, you're going to want a slim rad at most 30 millimeters thick up top with standard fans, because you will run into your motherboard's VRM heatsinks if you go thicker like this AlphaCool XT45 when fans are installed. The front panel can also take a 280, and only here do you have more clearance for a thicker rad since you're not running into the VRM heatsink issue like in the top panel. When it comes to pump rest units, in all honesty, you really only have a few optimal options. First is right up against your front mounted radiator. Second would be your rear panel if your configuration does not involve top radiator tubes running down the back. And third is the PSU shroud if you have a short GPU water block like the Bitspower Nebula here for the RTX 4090 Founders Edition. Okay, so here's my conclusion on the Arx 700 case. I think the build quality and sheet metal is pretty good, in fact better than some cases from bigger names, but there are still better options within this price range. Personally, Fantex NV5 as well as the new Mark II version at $99 is very hard to beat for a compact mid-tower despite the different style. G400A at $109, Leon Lee O11 Mini and Air Mini are also at lower prices as well. Corsair's original 4000D Airflow, not the new frame 4000D, are all my personal recommendations over the Arx 700. So the alternatives that I recommended were based on build quality, features, price, and aesthetics all combined. Now, as of right now, I personally would not buy this version of the Arx 700 because it needs improvements and updates, like reducing the number of cable tie loops in the back, making sure it supports back connect motherboards, making the motherboard tray and PSU shroud look better, and also updating the RGB and fan hub in the back is what I really care about. Now, vertical GPU mounting could be a bonus. I think some people might like that. I personally don't care for vertical mounting GPUs, but I think if Endorphy made those changes, it would actually be a pretty solid competitor. Anyways, here's the time lapse to the final custom loop build. Thanks for watching. Enjoy.